All right, welcome everybody. And if you have been part of the accidental counselor community, you will know me. My name is Rocky Biasi. I'm the creator of the accidental counselor training. And if you've been part of the accidental counselor community, you'll also know Melo Calarco, who's with me here today. Melo is a really great friend of mine who's in Melbourne, Victoria, and we were lucky enough to catch up in Sydney and have a meal recently. Melo's actually been a repeat guest on our accidental counsellor conferences. And I've just been so excited because as Melo and I, we've known each other for a couple of years, but he's been telling me about, he's been writing a book, and here it is right here. And I just can't tell you how excited I am about this book. Now, I know this is going to sound strange because I've never really recommended books. It just sounds a little bit strange, I know. But I'm really highly recommending this book, and I'll tell you why, because I've read it, and it's a wonderful book. I know without a shadow of a doubt that if people do the things in this book, their lives will be transformed. And how do I know that? Because they're things that I do in my life. They're things that I've used with my clients, and I know that they work. And first of all, I should, if you don't know either me or Melo, it's not about me today. Let me just tell you a little bit about Melo. He teaches others how to stay energized, perform at their best, conquer burnout. And Melo's lessons are drawn on his 3 decades of professional experience, on his own life of cycling and trekking more than 30,000 kilometers across 5 continents. His work has been described as truly transformational, and I can attest to that. One of the wonderful things about the book is that it comes to life with his storytelling of his traveling, his storytelling of the clients that he's worked with. And I just want to just quickly share with the audience, Melo, and then I'll hand over to you.
Sure.
There are 9 chapters in this book, and it starts on self-awareness and burnout and self-care, stress and resilience, self-regulation. They're just wonderful chapters. Overwhelm and anxiety, fear and trust, purpose and perseverance, and also balance. So it's just extraordinary. I know when we caught up together, Melo, you were telling me you had to actually take some chapters out, and I hope one day I can get to read them also. So everybody, I just want to let you know, Melo and I have been saying we may need to turn this into a series. We were joking that, is this going to be 4 hours? But we want to sort of be respectful of everybody's time. And we're going to do the best we can and maybe try to give you an overview of as many chapters as possible. So enough from me. Melo, my good friend, welcome. Thank you very much for taking the time. I'm really excited to talk to you about your wonderful book.
Thank you, Rocky. What a super introduction. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you enjoyed the book. It sounds like you got some tips and tricks already from it, which is great. And
Yes.
That's the idea. The idea of the book is to help people and make it very practical and implementable, as much as possible. So I'm really excited about discussion. I've got a coffee here, sitting here. So let's have a chat. Let's have a chat about it and see what we can cover in this time. So grab yourself a coffee, everybody.
Yes, welcome. I'm going to be sipping out of my lemon water here. So yes, because we're friends, we're going to try to, hopefully it'll sound like 2 friends having a chat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Melo, the practical nature of the book, there are really wonderful strategies, practical tips. Honestly, I can't rave enough about it. One of the reasons why is, and I've shared this with you before, Melo, is that there are things that I do in my life and that I also talk about and teach. And also the other thing is that some of your phrasing and descriptions of some of the ideas was almost like I was hearing myself. Now, obviously not all of it, but there were some of them, where it was like, that's almost word for word what I say. So it was a very experience. Anyway, enough of that.
Yeah.
But we should start because the first chapter is on self-awareness. And I wanted to, if you could just share with us, why is it so important? Because it seems to me that self-awareness is really difficult for a lot of people. And what do you actually put that down to? And I'd really love if we could maybe discuss and maybe
Mm.
do some practices around the 90-second breath break.
Yeah,
That, that, that can help with self-awareness.
Yeah, it all starts with self-awareness in many ways. So in terms of preventing burnout in the first place, like it's actually being self-aware and understanding what you're going through and what you're experiencing. If you are feeling stressed, what do I need to do? So it all starts with self-awareness. I always say you can't change what you don't notice. Yeah, so it is about sort of noticing what's going on. So if you're starting to feel some sort of physiological responses, which is usually what you feel, tight shoulders, tight chest, headaches, migraines, or feeling flat or unmotivated, all these things, being aware of that is the first step to then make some change towards that. You know, what do I need to do? Maybe I need to go for a walk. Maybe I need to stop. Maybe I need to pause. Maybe I need to do a 90-second breath break, which we'll talk about in a moment. So it all starts with self-awareness. And in fact, for anybody, for emotional intelligence, we talk a lot about in the work that we do ourselves. And the very first step of emotional intelligence is being self-aware.
Yes.
And it is about understanding yourself, understanding your behaviors, understanding your actions, understanding the way that you work. So it all starts with it. And when it comes to self-awareness and mindfulness is a great tool for us to actually become more self-aware. There's two practices with mindfulness. And one is what's called the formal practice, where you actually stop, you pause, you do some breath work, you tune into the body. And that's a meditation practice, let's say, that will train your awareness to be more aware of how you're feeling physically, mentally, emotionally. But there's also what's called the non-formal practice. And that's when you are going about your day and doing all those 10,000 things that you do in the day, like brushing your teeth or washing your hair or whatever it is that you're doing in the day, and you become more aware of that. So you pay more attention to that. And both of those practices will help you to be more aware in the moment. And this is important because we're often hijacked out of the moment. We live in a world that we are bombarded by these things, telephones and external media and all of these. I read something recently that says we are exposed to more information in one single day than somebody in the 15th century would be exposed to in a whole year of their life.
That's just incredible. And it probably talks about why the book, I keep holding it up, about burnout, and beating burnout, finding balance it's been so well received because our fast-paced modern world, it really is easy to be taken out of the moment. And I know we'll talk about the power of being present. So it seems to me that it is difficult for a lot of us to be self-aware because we're bombarded with all of this information.
Yeah.
And the practice of which, by the way, everybody, I do it myself. It's one of my favorite times in the morning. But I tell you that what I really like is Melo's non-formal description of it, in lining up in a queue somewhere or whatever you're doing, because it's almost like building a muscle, isn't it? And the more you do it, you're sort of reprogramming the neural pathways in your brain.
Totally, yeah. And that's my idea. I want to make all the practices as implementable and easy as possible. So we talk about the 90-second breath break, something that I teach a lot of. So it's one of the first sort of points of call that I teach to train your awareness. And it's the most simplest sort of entry point to practicing a meditation practice per se. So 90-second breath break is, let's say you're at work and you're busy, you've got too many windows open on your computer and you're just getting a bit scattered and overwhelmed, you're starting to feel a bit anxious or whatever, or distracted or unfocused. Then just stopping, pausing and following your breath for 90 seconds. You can close your eyes if that's applicable to you, or wait, depending on where you are. But just following your breath for 90 seconds will instantly deactivate the fight and flight response, instantly deactivate what's called the sympathetic nervous system when we're operating in this sort of fast pace. And it'll activate the opposite of the fight and flight response, which is called the rest and digest phase, or often called the parasympathetic nervous system. So actually, physiologically, it only takes about 90 seconds to reset the nervous system.
Well, Melo, it's actually really interesting, and I hope we can actually do it and maybe guide folks through it. I'd love to do a 90-second breath break right now. There's a wonderful neuroscientist, Jill Bolte Taylor. Some folks may know of her. She had a TED Talk that went viral. And in her research, she says that the lifespan of an emotion is 90 seconds. So I thought,
yes,
really interesting. Yeah.
I heard that also recently, actually. Like an anxious moment, for example, anxiety can only last 90 seconds. So that's the impermanence of it that actually is, it's good to understand that. So I
Yes.
agree. So 90 seconds can make the world of difference and get you out of your head and into your body.
That's another
Yeah.
one that I use exactly like that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure. I don't know if you want to do one, we can. It's a matter of like, I'm not sure if everyone's going to fall asleep on us in that 90 seconds. Um, we can, if you like. I don't mind. We can do a short version. We can do a 30-second version of it.
Let's
And
do a 30-second
yeah,
version.
just to understand what it's like to drop out of the busyness of your mind and drop into your body. So I'll just do a shorter version of it. So wherever you are, unless you're driving the car, of course, or somewhere that's not applicable for you, but wherever you are right now, just stop what you're doing, put your pen down, put the hand off the mouse button, and just be where you are. Wriggle yourself into the back of the seat, and if you can, close the eyes off. And as soon as you close the eyes off, you take out the external stimuli around you immediately. So you actually start drawing inwards towards your body and mind. So closing the eyes off and just notice the body in the shape that it's sitting in, become aware of the body and just feel comfortable in whatever shape that is. Ideally, feet flat on the floor, back against the chair, hands resting wherever they want to rest. So we're just becoming aware of the body. And the second thing we're going to do is become aware of the breath. What's the breath doing right now? Notice the breath moving in and out of the body. And we're going to make a change to the breath to make it more intentional. So whenever you're ready, taking in a deeper inhale in through the nose, taking in new energy, and then a nice, slow, long exhale all the way out. And we'll do that a few times. Nice, deep inhales in through the nose, filling up the body, filling up the belly, and follow the out breath all the way out, letting go on the out breath, releasing. And we'll just do it a few more times, just in terms of this practice here. Let's do 3 more rounds. Nice deep inhales. Slow, long, releasing exhales all the way out. And I'll let you do 2 more on your own. All the way out. And just notice where you notice the breath the most, around the nostrils, around the throat, around the chest, around the belly. Do 1 more to close off this practice. 1 more deep inhale. And 1 slow, long, releasing exhale. And if you haven't fallen asleep on us, gently open the eyes and come back to the room. Now, that was around about 30 seconds to a minute, so just a shorter version of it. But just instantly, you just notice that this calming effect, comes over your body, takes you out of that responsive, reactive mode of the amygdala firing up, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and it just drops you into your body and your breath. So simple practice, super effective, and I recommend to do that throughout the day. So anytime you're feeling a bit scattered, anytime you're feeling a bit distracted, anytime you're feeling tired or fatigued, just doing that practice throughout the day will really help you to self-regulate.
Yes, and when you shared that with us, Melo, in our conferences in the past, I've actually shared this with in my workshops, and people have raved about it. I felt it also, and I really like the idea that you don't always have to sit there with your eyes closed. We need to go to the bathroom several times a day, right? Well, if you're anything like me, when you're washing your hands, you're becoming mindful of the breath. And I really love that the informal aspect of it, where we can be doing this in our daily practices. And the more we do that, the more it builds up the habit. But we've got a lot to cover, Melo, so we're just going to keep going into the next chapters.
Sure.
The next one is on burnout and self-care. And so I was wondering if we can maybe just have a chat about burnout. And I think that one of the big things that I took from your book, Melo, is the actual gradual onset of burnout and how bodies can be so used to it that we miss the signs. So I'd love to maybe just talk to us about either the stages or the evolution from stress to burnout, and maybe any sort of self-care essentials that you advocate.
Sure. And that's why I wrote about self-awareness first, because exactly what you said, most people don't notice they're burning out until it's far too late. So they're not even aware of it, and it turns into some sort of physiological response. In fact, for the book itself, I interviewed about 200 people. all different, walks of life, from CEOs, executives, to athletes, to entrepreneurs, to a whole range of different people in different levels of work that they did. And 90% of the people that I interviewed didn't realize they were burning out until it was too late. They didn't even know, like they didn't even recognize the signs. So, and the other 10% that was left from that 90%, they sort of saw the signs, they could see things weren't quite right, but they didn't know what to do about it. They didn't have the techniques, or the other ones actually just kept pushing on through regardless. So that first point is that self-awareness, being aware of the signs, reading the signs. And the definition of burnout, you've probably heard before, and many of you might have heard through the World Health Organization, WHO, in 2019. They revised the version of burnout actually for the 11th time. And it's actually described as conceptualized by unmanaged stress not being properly regulated. So it sort of sneaks up on you. And they specifically define unmanaged workplace stress. So I agree with that, but I also disagree with that, because also we can just have stress in our life. We can have stress at home, running a family, and all these other stressors, financial stress. So stress in general. So it's just basically unmanaged stress not being successfully managed. And then there's 3 criteria that they talk about, which sort of define stress as a diagnostic tool. Number 1 is that absolute sheer exhaustion, like just tired, lethargy, can't get up in the morning, can't move, unmotivated, don't feel like doing anything. It's a bit different just to being tired, where a good night's sleep will fix that.
Yeah.
It's more like you have 3 good nights sleep and you're still tired. So that's that sheer exhaustion. So that's number 1, exhaustion. Number 2 is that disconnect, feeling a bit disconnected and detached from yourself, from your work, from your colleagues, from the work that you're doing. Maybe also unmotivated, not really inspired to do the work that you want to do, and also a bit negative and cynical. So you might be moaning more than usual, a bit more cynical towards the people around you. So that's number 2. And the third one is that lack of efficacy. So just inefficient in the work that you're doing, not functioning well, forgetting things, making errors. Things that normally will be easy for you are just harder to do. Someone will give you a job to do, and it's just, oh my God, it's just so difficult. So those 3 things are what, are the diagnostic criteria to sort of realize you're burning out. And yeah, it's pretty, by the time you've reached burnout, you're dysfunctional in a way. So there's stages there. And we can talk about that evolution of stress to sort of reach that stage, because in many ways, it's the end result that we feel, and then it's too late.
Right.
So we'll talk about the evolution of it. So I believe in the work that I do, and I know that you echo it in the work that you do too, is there is stress in our life, right? We have stress in our life, and we can't change that. We have everyday stressors coming in, whether that's deadlines, whether that's workload, whether that's your family, whether it's your boss, whether it's all those things that are going on. And I call this the green zone, this everyday stress zone. And we can function in that zone as a high performer, as a high achiever, if we look after ourselves. Yes. If we do our basic self-care practices like sleeping well, eating well, exercising, meditating, doing some hobbies, doing some mental training ourselves. So we can stay in that green zone and operate well, no problem at all. And we can manage our stress on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I have a saying around this that says, ask yourself every single day, what have I done for me today?
Love that.
Yeah, what have I done that's just for me, that fills up my cup, that makes me feel good, that energizes me? So if we do those things every day, we can stay in that green zone, no problem. But if we don't, and many people don't, unfortunately, it tips over the edge into the chronic stress zone, which I call the yellow zone. Chronic stress feels more like overwhelmed, overstimulated, can't sleep at night, overthinking, can't switch off, cortisol and adrenaline going through the body. And many people listening to this right now are probably sitting in this zone, because many people do, unfortunately. We're bombarded by this fast pace that we're living in and working in. So this is more like the too much zone.
Yeah.
And then from there, it rises into this sort of tipping point. And the tipping point, the word that I sort of hear a lot of in this tipping point is overwhelm. So now this overstimulated work, this overloaded work is turned into overwhelm. And I work in psychiatric clinics also. I work in 4 psychiatric clinics. And I often ask the patients when they come into my programs, I say, so what happened to you? What was going on for you to end up in here? And they jump into the program. Many of them say to me, it was just too much. I couldn't take it anymore. It was too much. It was overwhelming. So they use the word overwhelm. So for all of you out there, listening to this, if you're starting to use that word overwhelm or hearing it in your workplace, it's a bit of an orange flag that, not coping. So then it turns from that overwhelm and then it goes downhill from there. And that downhill is what's called allostatic stress, allostatic load. So this constant wear and tear on the body and mind starts wearing away at us. And this is more like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I can't keep going like this. And this is that feeling of allostatic stress. That's the orange zone. And then that leads to the red zone eventually. So the red zone is full burnout or poor mental health. And the red zone is like, I'm not just done, I just can't keep going.
Yes, I think it's important to actually stress that. I'd love to get your opinion because I've shared that in my some of the workshops that I do, Melo, because I think it's a wonderful framework, those stages. And a lot of people say sometimes almost as a figure of speech, oh, I'm so burnt out. But if you're sort of clinically really burnt out, you're probably not at work and functioning at that level. You're probably more in that sort of orange allostatic zone.
That's right.
That's how I think about it. And a lot of people, by the way, we're a lot of us are in the yellow-orange zone, where chronic stress or allostatic, the orange zone, ready to tip over to the red zone, we're in full burnout. And this when you have, I work with a lot of schools and teachers, and you get to the end of term and you get sick and it's time to have a break, but you don't have any energy to do the things that you really like doing. It becomes a really terrible cycle downward.
Totally, yeah, exactly. And it is, you're exactly right. Many people at the end of the year, they crash. They finally get their 4 weeks annual leave or whatever it is, and they just are sick for the first week because their nervous system is shot. They're exhausted. So and it is a bit of a continuum in some ways. You might have, let's say, you've got a big project or end of terms coming up, and there's a big, sort of end result there, and you will be tired. There's a natural tendency to be tired, but you ask yourself the question: what do I need to do to get back to the green zone again? What do I need to do to fill up my resources? Maybe it's to have a break. Maybe it's to have a little holiday. Maybe it's to do more exercise or, do more meditation. So there is a bit of we do fluctuate on that spectrum in some ways, but always ask yourself, how can I get back to the green zone? And always ask yourself, what can I do for myself? Those basic self-care fundamentals are essential.
Which tells me, everybody, that this can be managed and there's some key things to actually managing it, not just self-care things, but being aware. Melo and I shared when we had dinner recently this sort of funny story, because when Melo was researching the book, before it was even published, he shared with me the whole 90% of people are not aware, and so if you're not aware, you could be going through these stages and you're not aware, right? And I said, and I just couldn't get my head around the 90%. I was like, how can that be? It just can't be right. And then we had dinner, remember, Melo, and I said to you, I share it with my workshops. It's sort of funny, not funny. And I say, wait a minute, I'm one of the 90%. and the how I sort of come to that was that pre-COVID, I was on 30, 40 flights a year, and I've been doing it for years. And it was like, if someone said to me, are you burnt out? Now, obviously I wasn't clinically burnt out because I was still functioning, running workshops and all of that. But Melo, because of your stages, I thought I'm absolutely, definitely must have been pre-COVID in the yellow, orange. I would probably make even orange zone. Here's how I knew, everybody, and this is what I want to share with you all. I knew because pre-COVID, we're flying around everywhere. Then we have a global pandemic. No one's traveling anywhere. We're in lockdown. And I felt really guilty because I'd never felt better in my life. And people are struggling, and we've got a global pandemic. I was sleeping better, eating better, exercising more. Obviously, that the travel component I recognized really took a toll. And I didn't notice that until we had the pandemic. Sometimes we don't notice until our annual leave.
Yes.
And the secret is from reading your book, is trying to pick it up and notice it before you get to those sort of end stages.
Exactly. Preventative measures along the way. It's so much better. And there's sort of three main signs that we go through, and sometimes they slip through the cracks. The obvious ones are the physical ones. Those physical ones where you are feeling tired physically, tight shoulders, chest, like I said before, those physiological response, they're more obvious. But we also have behavioral ones and emotional ones that we sometimes miss. And emotional ones can be that just feeling a bit unmotivated, lacking that drive and purpose in your life. And that's a sign also that you're burning out. And behavioral might be, you might isolate yourselves, a bit of withdrawal from going to social functions, or even showing your face on Zoom screens at meetings and things like that. They're all signs of burnout, that sort of emotional, behavioral, and physical signs. But it's often the physical one that's the one that we feel, and it can be a panic attack. It can be some sort of critical physiological response. I mentioned in the book there that a few of my clients, they didn't even know they were burning out until they were driving to work one day and they had a fully blown panic attack and they couldn't function. So they turned the car around and went to the doctors and said, I don't know what's going on here. I'm having a heart attack or something. So that's the end point. We have to catch it in that green zone so we can actually prevent it in the first place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melo. So the next chapter was on stress and resilience. And I'd love for you to share. And anytime you want to weave in some of your wonderful stories of your clients and, your travel stories, oh my goodness, it just brought the book to life. So I love the story in this chapter on stress and resilience of the Virunga National Park in Rwanda. And linking it to the stress response. I think one of the major takeaways that I took from your book is that the stress response, we need it. It's helpful. It helps us survive, but it really should be in short spurts. And I get the sense that we've actually lost the art of turning that stress response down. So
sure.
See if you could talk to us about that. And what is it? It's so simple about the breath that can actually untangle that.
Yeah, great. I think first of all we should explain that the book is actually, every chapter in the book that we're talking about right now, there's a story from my travels. So I did cycle around the world on my mountain bike, as you do, and had all sorts of crazy experiences. And so every single chapter that I have actually starts with a story from my travels, whether it is what I'm going to tell you about in a moment, or having machine guns in my ribs, or catching malaria in Africa. So all of these stories will frame the chapter, the lesson that I learned from that experience, and then how you can benefit from that. So that's how the book is set out. And this particular chapter you're talking about on stress and resilience, the story that I open up with on that one is when I was traveling through Rwanda and Uganda. I really wanted to go visit the gorillas up in the high mountains. Actually, it's the area where Diana Fossey had her family of gorillas that worked with gorillas in the mist. It wasn't the best time to be there at the time because the Congolese president was assassinated, just next door. So there was a lot of political unrest in the area. It wasn't the safest place to be, but we were there anyway, and we sort of went for it. So climbing up into the mountains, first time ever to visit the mountain gorillas of Africa, and heading through all the bush, and as you're climbing up, you're getting cut by all the trees and limbs. It's quite a dangerous sort of adventure to start with. You have a team of guides with you carrying machine guns and machetes, and they're sort of chopping their way through. So we were on looking for the mountain gorillas of Rwanda, and they didn't seem to be anywhere in sight. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, like we were sort of halfway up the mountain, this family was present there, because I noticed that one of the mountain guides was making these funny noises to sort of alert them. And out of nowhere, this big, huge silverback gorilla came mock charging me. And I didn't even know what it was. All the bush started moving and quite violently, and came mock charge, came straight towards me. And we got told, you're not able to look into the eyes of the gorillas. You have to look down. So I looked down and literally just brushed past my legs, and he went a bit further ahead. So that initial surge of adrenaline, and it's exactly what a fight and flight response is. So obviously you read about it in textbooks and you know about it in sort of the stress response sort of idea, but this was a real version of it. Shall I turn around and run and take flight, or shall I turn around and fight? I've got no chance against a 600 kilo silverback gorilla. But I was in that moment, and I froze basically. So, and that was probably the safest thing to do, is to freeze. But I will say this, that after the gorilla took a few steps ahead and walked ahead, he ripped out this big piece of bamboo and started chewing on it. And he looked back at me, and I know we're not supposed to look in his eyes, but I did look in his face, and I just felt the opposite of fight and flight response. I felt totally at peace, because this gorilla was absolutely beautiful. His eyes were beautiful, looking at me, and he's just sort of eating this bamboo there, and just felt this connection with this animal. And then the whole family came out, and there was, aunties and uncles and children. It was a family of about 12, I think, all in all. And it was an amazing experience for a few hours, and it was just absolutely beautiful, this connection we had. But then what happened, it actually started raining. So it started like pelting down with like monsoonal rain. And there's a beautiful little baby, who's only 6 months old, also, that came towards me and wanted to sort of hug me, and you had to sort of back off. So it was a beautiful experience. So, but what happened when it started raining, the mother gorilla started leading her crew, her tribe or pack into the bush. So we went into the bush, and funnily enough, the guide also led us into the bush and said, "Let's follow the gorillas behind." And I thought, "Oh my God, we're crazy following this family of gorillas into this bamboo thicket." But we did anyway, and we followed into this bamboo thicket, and you couldn't really see. It was quite dark, and there was a mix of us humans and a mix of gorillas, and there's all these sort of shapes around, and we were literally meters, sometimes even just feet away from the gorillas, huddled up in this little shelter, sort of sharing this experience. There was babies, there was little ones there. One of the gorillas grabbed a machete, stole it off of the guard, and started flying around, and it was crazy. It was a really surreal experience. But then what happened, another fight and flight response was triggered, was we started hearing this crashing through the bushes coming through. And even the guides were a bit afraid. I noticed the guides sort of like back off. And one of the guides even hid behind me and hid behind other people. And this guy's got a machine gun in his hands. And the head guide started making these guttural noises. It's like a gorilla sort of groan, and that sort of lets other gorillas know that we're here. Anyway, I knew the big silverback gorilla was in with us, so it couldn't have been him. There was another silverback gorilla that was following us, and he was even bigger than the original silverback gorilla. So he came to the doorway, and he basically, shutted out the whole place, and he come charging into the bamboo thicket. We had nowhere to go because we were sort of stuck there, and he whacked one of my companions with a backhander on the back of his arm, and then stopped there and made this growl and a groan. I thought, oh my God, another surge of adrenaline going through my body again. It's like fight and flight response all over again. But again, he did the same thing. He sort of let us know that he's here. He took a few steps and he settled and just sort of kept an eye on his family. So within the space of this 1 hour or so, 2 pure shots of adrenaline and, this fight and flight response really, I really felt the effect of it. And what we're talking about there, it is designed for short-term stimulus. It is designed to get you out of that situation. It is designed, it's helped us survive as a species. But bringing it into the modern world that we live in, it's not designed to be switched on all the time. It's not designed to be humming along in a fight and flight response all the time. And that's what we do at work. Emails, ping, the boss comes in, ping, it's just, constantly going on this fight and flight response. So it is a handy mechanism to have.
Yes.
And I really felt the realness and the rawness of it in that moment. But I also realized it's not a good mechanism to be switched on all the time, every day, because it will lead to burnout eventually.
Yeah, and that's what wears us down. By the way, everybody, that's just a little glimpse of just amazing stories, as Melo said, that frames every chapter of the book. And that's why I've been saying the stories just bring the book to life. And I'm glad we were able to at least get one story in there. What a remarkable experience you've had, not just there, Melo, but in all of your travels. It's really amazing. In our modern world, there's a common, as Melo said, the boss, a colleague, a family member, a comment on social media. I mean, we're constantly bombarded. And so that stress response gets triggered constantly. It seems to me, Melo, that more now in our modern life compared to maybe our ancestors of hundreds of years ago, that we need to learn now more than ever how to turn that stress response down. It's needed, it's necessary, it helps us survive. But when it's turned on and it's on constantly, we worn down, and so could you tell us a little bit more about how the breath can turn down that stress response? It's really interesting. Sometimes I say, let's do a little breathing exercise. Sometimes, especially with the, students in high school or something like that, and there'll be a little chuckle.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's so funny. I'm just so grateful that we're breathing every second of every day.
Yeah, exactly. Some of us aren't even aware of the breath. We're not even aware that we're breathing, and that's why that first piece is self-awareness. So the first piece to prevent burnout happening in the first place is being self-aware. Then the second piece is having the ability to self-regulate. So
Right.
learning how to self-regulate, and that's where the breath can come into it. That 90-second breath break that we played with earlier, that is the perfect tool to down-regulate the amygdala. The
Yeah.
amygdala is what triggers the fight and flight response and actually down-regulates that quite immediately. As soon as we breathe slowly, especially on the exhale,
That's right.
it tricks the body into a relaxation response.
Yes.
So you cannot be in a full stress response if you're breathing slow. So the breath is the ability to self-regulate. I was reading something recently also that says a sigh, like human beings naturally sigh around about every 5 minutes. And
Right.
it's actually the body's natural mechanism to actually release, stress and cortisol and self-regulate. So a human sigh is actually regulated for that. But the other interesting thing on that article that I was reading was social media, emails, all of these things, when you're switched on all the time and you don't switch off, it actually stops that sigh happening. So you're
Oh
getting
wow.
in, yeah, so you're getting in this overstimulated state and you're
Right.
staying there. So this natural sigh, and we can trick our body into a sigh by actually doing another breathing technique, which is basically 2 in breaths as snatching an in breath and then a long out breath like this, like, ah,
That that um
ah.
that physiological sigh, Mello, is something that I've read about. Dr. Andrew Huberman and some others,
Yes.
and I've actually been doing that myself, and it's just amazing. I've been teaching it to other people, and it's really simple, everybody. And
Mm.
and it's 2 inhales through the nose, as Mello showed, and a long exhale.
Ah, yeah.
It's a long exhale through the mouth. And they're talking about 5 minutes a day, but I've actually noticed even just doing 5 of those breaths,
Yes.
just like that, it is just really powerful. So yeah,
Totally.
just
Yeah.
yeah, really wonderful, Mela. So thank you. And I'm conscious of time. I don't know how we'll go, but you know what I'm thinking is we're going to keep going, and I'd love to maybe just quickly go through all of the chapters, and
Yeah, sure,
if
sure.
we need to break it up into 2 segments, where we'll do that. Um, the next chapter was on self-regulation, and you've just spoken about that. But I'm wondering if you can maybe just talk quickly, because one of the big things that I took away from that chapter, Mello, was this: when we are able to self-regulate using the breath, amongst other
Mm,
techniques, it creates space.
yes.
And that is so powerful, everybody, because it stops the instant reaction to
Yeah.
things that we encounter. And so I'm wondering if you can maybe just talk about space, and maybe even
Mm.
if you want to use a story, it's up to you. The one with the machine guns in your ribs was just out of this. So,
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it is like self-regulation. There's many different self-regulation techniques we can use, and my go-to is the breath, and it is one thing that we have on us all the time, so we can always use that. There's a variety of different breathing techniques you can use, like we said, that sighing one, or just a long exhale, or more invigorating breath. So there's a whole series of them. But the other one is also through the body. There's 2 things that are always in the present moment, and one is the breath, and the other is the body.
yeah,
So we use the body as a portal to access the present moment. Because
yeah,
many of the times when we're stressed and we're anxious and we're getting these thoughts and things going through our mind, we're just in our head.
right,
So we want to actually drop out of our head and into our body. And the senses are one of the best portals. So even if you were feeling stressed and you just popped up for a moment and asked yourself, what do I hear right now? What do I
right,
smell right now? What do I feel right now? All these senses are a good way for you to access the present moment and come back to the present moment through your body and breath. I often ask the question, in my seminars and workshops, and it's a long discussion. We don't have scope to do the full discussion here, but is it possible to feel anxious and be fully present at the same time?
right,
Is it possible? Like, if you really think about that, probably not, because if you're anxious, you're usually anxious about something in the future, or
that's
you're
right,
overwhelmed about something. So becoming present is a great way to self-regulate and to bring yourself back to the present moment. And using all these tools are a great portal to get back to the now. And exactly what you're saying there with that space there. So You could be in a heated meeting, let's say, and you're feeling a bit stressed or overwhelmed, or you're just feeling a bit overstimulated. Typically, there's a stimulus, there's something that stimulates us, and there's a reaction to it. And usually it's like that stimulus response. It's quick, and we just get this reaction or a physiological reaction or even an emotional reaction. So that's what normal sort of life is, when, especially when we're stressed and busy. When we start practicing mindfulness techniques, we start working on breath techniques, even if it is just taking 3 breaths, we start creating space between that stimulus and response.
Right.
And if you ask me personally, like on that note, I've been practicing meditation for 30 plus years and have not missed a day forever. And often people ask me, what do you practice, and what do you get out of it? And what's the one thing that you get out of it? When I think about it, what it does, it helps me to create space between stimulus and response.
Yes.
So then I can make a mindful decision. I can make choices. I can stop and I can pause. I can look at the bigger picture. So the more that I meditate, the more that I practice these mindfulness practice, the space becomes bigger.
Right. It's just a beautiful way of describing it, Melo. It's been my experience, and everybody. I was working with a client recently, and he's sort of like in a gang, and he has that sort of like bravado and power, but he's really struggling. And when I was showing him this, and I said to him, this space, this ability to choose rather than reacting,
yes,
that's the real power.
Yes.
Your ability to be flexible enough to decide how you will respond rather than just simply reacting to the stimulus. I said to him, is it because it's all about the bling and the is there a price on that? Can you is there any money that you can put on that? I don't think there is, in my opinion. So yes.
No, and it could be the space of one breath. It could be somebody says something to you that harms you, or is not a nice comment. If you just take one breath in and out, it's enough. That pause is quite powerful. So whatever you can do to create that space is really powerful.
Indeed. And so being aware of your body and body scan techniques, and being aware of the things around you, really important. Melo, in this next chapter on overwhelm and anxiety, I think we could have done an entire podcast just on this. There's so much great stuff. And I think it actually revolves around this life lesson that you have in the book, and I want to read it for the audience, where you say overwhelm and anxiety is often created in your mind. We're not our thoughts. Rather than focusing attention on the what ifs that may or may not happen, try to focus on what is happening in the present moment. You will always cope with that. There's just so much in that life lesson. And if you could just share some thoughts around that, I'd love it. For me, it's liberating to understand we're not our thoughts. We're not even our emotions. And, I don't want to go too deep. We're not even our bodies, right?
Yes.
But anyway, over to you.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So when someone says to me, let's say I'm working in a mental health clinic and I'm working in one of the psychiatric clinics, someone says to me, I'm anxious, or I'm depressed, or I'm scared. As soon as they say I am plus the thing, it means they are identifying with their thoughts.
Yes.
Their thoughts have become their identity. So the first thing that I want to impart to them is to get them to realize that they are not their thoughts. Thoughts are just thoughts. That's all they are. But we're really good at actually attaching to our thoughts and creating these stories, and almost such a believable story that you feel that it's real. And our thoughts, our body does not know the difference between a thought and a real threat, let's say. Yes. So our body will have that same physiological response from a thought. So that anxiety, that uncertainty, that fear, all of these fearful thoughts, often they're not true. We've just created them in our mind. So my invitation in this chapter is actually to turn towards your thoughts, to look at them, to analyze them a little bit, to develop a relationship with them. And I have a system that I talk about in a formula in the book that is very simple and very effective, and it'll catch pretty much 99.9% of uncertain, fearful, or anxious thoughts. So if you're having an uncertain or fearful thought or an anxious thought, and it's starting to you're getting carried away by it, and you're starting to feel it through your body, stop, pause, create that space we're talking about, and turn towards that thought and ask it two simple questions. The first question is it true? Is it real? Is it a fact? Most of the time it's not, and that's just a thought that you actually created. And the second question, if it sneaks through that sort of filter there, is it helpful? Is it even helpful for me to think about this? Is it even helpful for me to feed this thought? So we have a choice whether to feed the thought or to let it go or to accept it or to move on. So, really, most of the time we get stuck in what's called what if scenarios. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I lose my job? What if I can't provide for my family? What if? Mm. And we have no control over that because they're not real. They're just thoughts.
Yes.
But if we can turn towards our thought and then focus also on what is happening in the present moment, we can always cope with that. And that's what I talk about in the book. If I was to go on that adventure, cycling around the world, and if I thought about all the what ifs, I wouldn't have gone in the first place.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. My great friend, Dr. David Lake, he years ago said to me something similar, and he said, you just need this book. And then he said, don't worry about the book, you just need the title. And the title of this book was What's Wrong with Right Now Unless You Think About It.
Yeah.
And I thought it's a really great title. And in the trainings we do, it's exactly as Melo's saying, what ifs, usually future-based.
Yes.
Was typically past. So I say the future is imagination.
Yep.
The past is memory. It's not dismissing them. It's just what it is.
Yep.
The past is memory. We can have different memories and people have different perceptions of the same memory. And what if is just pure imagination. We don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I often say the only place you're going to find reality is this moment, right?
Yes.
And
and what is, right? So what is happening? And this is the thing that we're talking about. You can always cope with the what is.
Yes.
You can always cope, no matter how difficult. We've gone through tough times. We've gone through a pandemic. We've gone through a whole lot of things. You can always cope with the what is. You can't cope with the what if because it hasn't happened yet and it may not even happen. It's just an imagination and the past has already happened. So the only moment that exists is now, and you can always cope with that. And this is what you were talking about. And that's what the quote says, believing that you will always have the resources inside of you to cope with what is happening in the moment, no matter how difficult. And you can get through anything, I promise you.
Yeah, and some people might think, this is a little bit of hopium, but I just unpack this for a moment, everybody. Think about it like this. If your mind's caught up in the past and future, your energy and your focus and attention is scattered. So are there difficult things that we need to deal with in the present moment? Of course. But if we're completely focused on that, what is happening right now, then we're bringing our full attention and focus to that moment. So at the very least, we'll be much better off responding to what is rather than the imaginary things of what might be or the things that we can't do anything about because it's already happened. Yeah.
That's right. And I talk about it in the book, a story about one of my clients and friends who actually was suffering cancer. And
such an inspirational story. Can you please share?
Yeah, just a short version of it. And the exact thing that I did with him was always to meet the what is. So basically he had a very aggressive throat cancer and he had a poor prognosis and the doctors were painting a very bad picture around it. They said by week 1, you're going to be having all this, radiotherapy and chemotherapy treatment and you're going to start feeling all these pains and you're going to break out in all these blemishes. You're going to lose your hair. You won't be able to eat foods and you'll be having smoothies. So they painted the worst case scenario for him, as they do in a way to prepare him. But I had the opposite approach to it. And I said, let's just meet each day. So I literally went to his house every single morning at around 8 o'clock. And we just met each day as it was. Every day we met it in the what is. How is he feeling on that particular day? And we did a strategy or a technique to meet that day as it was. We didn't think about next week, next month. It was a 49-day treatment protocol. We didn't think about day 49. We thought about day 1, day 2, day 3. Sometimes we did a meditation practice. Sometimes we did a prayer. Sometimes we did some affirmations. Sometimes we just chatted and talked. But we met each day in the present moment. And this guy was amazing. He actually worked all the way through, believe it or not. He runs multiple businesses. He had energy all the way through. Of course, he had good days and bad days and nausea and all those sort of things. but he was just amazing all the way through his 49 days of treatment. The oncologist actually rang up and said, I don't know, in my 45 years of oncology, I've never seen anybody come out like this.
Amazing.
Anybody. Yeah, with such a positive mindset. Physically, he ate solid foods all the way through. He kept going and kept walking and exercising. So we sort of just met each day as it was. We didn't worry about the prognosis. We didn't worry about the next weeks and the next thing. We met it and we did an amazing job together. And yeah, he's a strong guy, and a testament to his work and what he does. So that's just from meeting the day in the present moment.
It was such a great story, Melo, that I was so moved that I actually had to go and get my wife in the middle of reading it and said, I need to read this to you,
Well, I'm just going to plug in some electricity while you're chatting, man.
Sure. And I'll just share with the audience right now that, what Melo's talking about meeting the moment, and meeting the day is so important, because we can often just be defeated with the stories that we're telling ourselves in our minds, about, what if or what was, rather than what is. So a really powerful part of helping with managing overwhelm and anxiety. And we've just got a few more, and I'm just thinking, Melo, if we can maybe, we'd love to just go through a couple more of these chapters, and
we'll do with it what we will.
Yeah, and because then at least we have it, and so the next chapter was on fear and trust. Another awesome chapter here, and there's another life lesson that I really love here that I want to share with the audience. On the other side of fear, there is trust. Turn toward your fear and trust, and that you'll always have the resources, similar to what you were just speaking about. Yeah. You'll actually need to you'll get through any situation, no matter how difficult. And I really liked your approach and teaching here, particularly in terms of turning towards the fear to recognize it for what it is. To what I was just saying to the audience, Melo, as you were just away there for a moment, that we can often be defeated by the stories that we tell ourselves. And I love this line, that trust, that on the other side of fear, there is trust. And I was just wondering, do you feel that the more we actually do that, turn towards our fears and meet them, that the more we actually build in trust? And what do you advise in terms of changing our perspectives around limiting beliefs? Because oftentimes people just say, it's all right for you to say, but I just don't trust them or don't trust myself. And so there's those limiting.
Yes. Yeah, great. Yeah. And fear is one of those primal emotions, right? It's one of those really raw ones. We often don't know what we're feeling. So the first step is actually understanding. Out of all the emotions, obviously you have fear, anger, sadness, and joy. Fear is the one that actually does invoke a bit of a feeling through the body. So if we can actually, first of all, even understand it's fear that we're feeling, that's a good starting point.
Right.
Okay. That's the first point. To break it down, you might get confused. Through fear, you might feel stuck. You might feel procrastinating. You might feel trapped. You might have all these other feelings. You're not sure what you're even feeling. So the first step is, hey, that's fear I'm feeling. And then the second step is like, what is it that's making me scared? What is it that's creating this fear? What is it that's actually doing it? And then you're turning towards that fear. And, there's basic human fears. There's fear of rejection. There's fear of being judged. There's fear of change. There's fear of, heights, all these sort of things there. So if we can actually understand what the fear is, then we can develop a relationship with that fear and actually, again, turn towards it. And on the other side of fear is trust. I truly believe that, in many ways. So often we don't trust ourselves. Again, like I said, if I was to think about all those things that would happen to me along that trip, I never would have actually done it in the first place, because I'm operating out of fear.
Yes.
But if I trust myself that no matter what life throws at me, if I trust myself deep down that I've got what it takes to get through any situation, then the fear will override the trust. Yes. So an exercise that I teach a lot of, and what I do myself, is how can I flip my fears into trust? If I'm having a fearful thought, I'll flip it. Well, I trust that I have the resources inside of me to get through that situation. If I have a fear of, let's say I have a fear of public speaking, and public speaking is a deep fear that many people have, because it actually ticks a lot of those boxes of, of being judged, fear of making a mistake, fear of, doing the wrong thing, fear of inadequacy, fear of rejection. So it ticks a lot of those boxes. but it's not useful or helpful me to feed those fears. If I turn it to trust, I trust that I know my stuff. I trust that I'm going up there with good intention to help people. I trust that I'm speaking in front of people and I've got a message to share. And I trust that if somebody asks me a question, I have a response to that question. And if I don't, I'll, point them to the right direction. So we turn it into that trust. And once we start trusting ourselves, we can actually change the emotional response of it.
Yes. So here's what I'm wondering, Melo, about this. Do people have to believe that they have trust? Because the affirmations are really powerful, right?
Mm.
But what if they were to sort of come up with those, they flip their fear and come up, I trust that I have the resources, but then it's like, no, but I don't believe I do, And so then the mind kicks in again, doesn't it,
Yeah, and that's when it goes into that sort of limiting belief. I'm not smart enough. I'm not old enough. I'm too young. All those sort of things. So yes, you do have to believe it. You do have to embody it to some extent. It's one thing just to say it, but you don't really believe it.
Yeah.
So you do have to believe it. And I think the first point is really trusting yourself. Trusting yourself in whatever situation you get put in, and that will then help you to trust others, and that'll help you. So that expands from there. So having that deeper internal trust to actually, really believe in yourself. So yes, you do have to believe in it. The more you say it, you can use positive affirmations. You can use all sorts of techniques to positively affirm that, but you have to still embody it and feel it and sort of have that feeling in there. Limiting beliefs are another thing that I also use a similar thing that'll be to flip it. So, for example, I'm not smart enough. So what I'll say to someone that's saying those things is like, well, what evidence do you have that says you're not smart enough? So turn towards that, and they'll come up with something, and then how does that hinder you? How does that actually hold you back? So you're starting to sort of turn towards it there, and then turn and again flip it over to the other side. Well, I am smart enough. I have all the knowledge that I need to get through this situation. So really, first of all, questioning your limiting belief,
yes.
And the second of all, turning it around into a positive. And if you break that belief, how different will your life be? And if you can reverse that thinking, we can approach life in a different way. Many people say, I'm not quite ready. I have to do another course before I do that. I have to do another training before I do that. I have to do this. It's just that limiting belief there. But if you trust that whatever you have now is enough to get through that situation or do what you need to do and learn along the way, to be honest.
Yes. I think that's really important what you just said. And it's very similar to what I teach again. And just maybe two things that I'd like to highlight. And Mela just said maybe that you do have to learn and get resources along the way. So one way that you can trust yourself is by your experience. So turning towards your fear and actually saying, oh, I actually turned towards it. I met it head on. And I'm still here, I'm still functioning. It wasn't as bad as what I thought. That starts giving you evidence that you can trust yourself, right? And then you start believing that. And those questioning techniques that Melo just talked about there are almost exactly verbatim what I use. Is it true? Is that helpful and useful? And then another little phrase I say is, especially if people are so caught up in it, no, it's true, it's true, it's true. I say, just imagine that it disappeared for a day. What would that be like for you? Just for people to get a sense that, oh, I'd actually feel much better. And so just this understanding that holding on to that just is not serving us.
Yeah. And what new possibilities does it open up in you by letting go of that? Years ago, I was a personal trainer in another lifetime, right? Many years ago. Right. And that sort of learning along the way. My first ever client that I ever had, I worked in a gym for the first time as a personal trainer. And my first client that came through the door was in a wheelchair. And it was like, oh my God, I don't know how to work with somebody in a wheelchair. I did this little short personal training course. I didn't learn that. But guess what? I learned how to train somebody in a wheelchair and I became very good at it. My second client, I kid you not, was third trimester pregnant. So I didn't know what to do with her either. And like, okay, I had to learn how to, train somebody that was third trimester pregnant. But I had the trust that I was, learning along the way. And this is no word of a lie. My third client that I got as my personal training client was a type 1 diabetic. So it was like, I didn't have that information beforehand, but I became good at training special populations. I became good at training type 1 diabetics. I became good at that because I trusted that I would learn along the way. So just that deeper trust within yourself. So it's a good example of we don't have all the answers all of the time, but we can
Yes.
actually use our knowledge and skills and learn and take that knowledge in and then share that with others afterwards.
Mm. One more thing. A lot of us sometimes will be, as I said, consumed with the no, I don't trust myself, or I don't have the resources. We hold on to that. But if you actually really, it's like, how are you actually even here listening to what we're talking about right now? Go back,
Yeah.
think about your life. You've actually had to go through, because just living on this planet, just the nature of living on this planet, you've gone through some difficulties. So,
Yes.
how did you even get through that? Right. So,
Yes.
it's important to, yes, we can be in the grip of these limiting beliefs, but look at it carefully and clearly, and you'll notice that no matter what your mind is telling you, you do actually have resources.
Yes, exactly. And you'll always have them when you need them.
Yes, yes. And this was another wonderful chapter on purpose and perseverance. And it's things that we teach, and I really resonate with it. And I want to share this life lesson that you have in the book, Melo, and you say,
Yes.
when you align with your purpose and vision, you can stay motivated and energized to persevere toward your goals, no matter how challenging life gets. I just want to tell you that that is personally true for me. I was, in a previous life, in banking and retail, and I'm 58, right? So just to put it in the timeline, and when I was almost 30, I think I may have shared this with you, Mello. I was really depressed and said to my wife, "I can't do this anymore." Like we were
Mm.
managing our own retail shops, and and I said to her, I think I want to try teaching, because that's what I was thinking about when I was a 16-year-old. And so I actually went into teaching as a 30-year-old. And I know this sounds a little weird, but I just need to say that when I went into teaching, it's almost like everything opened up for me.
Mm.
I actually went to university to do my education degree, but I didn't complete senior schooling. I didn't know how to write an essay. I had to start from the very beginning as a 30-year-old,
Mm.
but I was really motivated, and I was energized throughout it. And I
Wow.
noticed that there were coincidences and synchronicities and situations that just happened, that opened up doors for me, and my life seemed to, I don't know how you would describe it, but be much more in flow when I was aligned with my true purpose and vision. So just wanted to share
Yes.
that with the audience. And I know you have wonderful experiences and stories around that too.
So your banking and finance wasn't your true purpose.
Not at all. Not at all.
No, it's hard to find. Well, you can find purpose within that, but
Yeah.
sometimes there's
For some
always
people, they can, for sure. Yeah.
that's right, exactly. And it is about really finding that deeper why. And sometimes that deeper why you do what you do. Sometimes we just go through the motions. I often ask in my seminars, and I share this. If I ask you the question actually, and I ask everybody out there today that's listening to this, could you run a full marathon tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.?
No.
Why not?
Oh, I've never done it. I haven't been prepared. I haven't trained for it. I've got a lot of excuses.
Yeah. 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'm talking 6 a.m. Go
Yeah.
for a full marathon. No. What
Right.
about if we added some purpose to that? What about if I hate to say this, but you're someone you love, your daughter, your loved one is unwell, not well, and at the end of that marathon, there's a magic potion that's going to actually help her and fix her, and she'll be cured forever and not have that problem anymore. Could you run a marathon tomorrow morning?
I'm going to say yes, because I don't know what's going to stop me.
That's it. Exactly. That's the purpose. So exactly that. So we all we did was add a purpose to that mission to
Yeah.
run that marathon, and it just changed things. And no matter what you do, you'll give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
You'll give it a go. So as
Yeah.
soon as we add purpose to it, we add that magic ingredient to it, then we, are driven to achieve and to do what we need to do to that. So, and it doesn't mean it has to be the biggest purpose in life either. It doesn't mean you have to change the world or, save the planet or whatever it is. It can just be your purpose. So finding your deeper why you do what you do. Often when I'm coaching people in the coaching environment that I work in, people are chasing the next raise, promotion in their job to be a general manager of a company. And I ask the question, why? And if the answer that they come back with doesn't really align with their purpose,
Right.
I'll keep digging. I'll keep
Yes.
sort of digging to sort of find their deeper why. So, and once we find that deeper why, and I feel, that's sort of, that's where we want to be. That's that alignment with purpose. That's the deeper why. Then, I'm happy with that sort of, so we can move through that. Because if it's just to make more money, or if it's just to get that promotion or that title, chances are it won't have legs. It won't continue to do that because you just chase the next title and more money and the next extrinsic motivator that keeps you going. But your deeper purpose and why is not being fulfilled.
It's remarkable how a lot of us are not even in touch with that. And so just one thing here, everybody, is if you're not familiar and you haven't spent time to even consider, you may want to just sit with that simple question, what's why? What's my reason for being, right? Now, I know I've had people say, I don't have one. And I'll say, okay. I mean, I actually think there is one. They're just not in tune with it. They're not recognizing it. I think it's there. I think I believe it's in everybody.
Yes.
You may not be aware of it. I would just recommend that, we spend some time there.
Yeah. And if it aligns with their values, then that's a good place. So I also ask the question, what are your top 3 values? And many people can't answer that off the top of their head. But once we dig deeper and sort of understand those values, it might be family, it might be love, it might be connection, it might be compassion, all these things that we can have as our values. Yep. So if your deeper why aligns with your values, then you're on the right track there. Yep. And so it's usually a value alignment in that way. So maybe for example, that person wants to be a general manager, because if you sort of go through, I do an exercise called the 5 whys. So basically, you go through sort of 5 questioning periods, and by the time you get to the 5th or 6th why, depending on what it is, if that aligns with the values. So, for example, that person wants to be a general manager. If we go down the track there, and the reason they want to be that is because they want to support their family and give their children the best education possible, and that aligns with their values of families, they're high on their values, then we're at the right place.
Right. That's right. Yeah. No, and I have my great friend Steve Wells that a lot of the audience who may be part of the accidental counsellor community, he actually runs he does lots of workshops around this, a values intensive workshop, and it's just really great work. So really great chapter there. I love the 5 whys, Melo, in that. We have 2 chapters left. The next one is on gratitude and compassion, another great chapter here. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little about why gratitude. I mean, a lot of us have heard about this. Why is it so powerful in terms of actually lifting well-being, creating balance? And I'd love maybe if you could weave in a little bit of the RAS, the reticular activating system that we talk about even in the accidental counsellor, and dose, those powerful neurochemicals that get released in the brain. I know there's a lot, Melo. Whatever you want.
That's all right. Yeah,
pick whatever you can.
Exactly. Whatever we talk about. But first of all, I was inspired in my travels while I was traveling, and most of my travels were in developing countries, through Africa, and I was living with indigenous people, with the tribes in the Masai Mara, or the Dogon people, or the Pygmies in Cameroon. So really sort of seeing the smiles on the children's faces and the laughter and the joy from these people that seemingly have nothing money-wise and hardly any clothes on their back, but they're smiling and they're laughing and they're grateful for, in Africa, you see a child just pushing a little wheel, a broken wheel with a stick, and they just can do that forever and ever and ever. And they're just happy and they're smiling. So that contagious aspect of their big smiles really touched me quite deep down. And it made me realize the power of gratitude in some ways. And I know many of us in the Western world, we do gratitude practices. We do 3 things you're grateful for. Sometimes we just do them as a bit of a tick box. We don't really embody them so much, but there is a lot of power in practicing gratitude and compassion. And I personally, I do 2 gratitude practices. So I start my day with almost like a reverse gratitude practice, actually. It's like I look forward to the day ahead. So I actually look at my day ahead instead of saying, oh my God, I've got 3 seminars, plus I've got 2 coaching sessions, and then I've got to do that meeting, and then I've got that, and then I've got to see Rocky, and I've got to talk to him for 2 hours. So I flip that around. I say, I can't wait to look at, can't wait to catch up with Rocky, which is genuine. I can't wait for my session this afternoon. I can't wait. So you reverse engineer, your day ahead. So you look forward to it with gratitude and enthusiasm. So that's how I start my day.
Love
That's
that.
before I even leave my bedroom. So I'm already like looking forward to my day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, I do write down 3 things I'm grateful for. So I used to just say it, but I found I was saying the same thing all the time. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful for my job. But I wasn't really feeling it so much. So I decided to write them down, and I decided to not do the same thing more than once. So I couldn't say I'm grateful for my wife every day, because that just wouldn't work, or my children. So I started to hardwire myself to start looking for more things I was grateful for.
That's the key.
Yeah, even little things, the smallest thing, like somebody opening a door for you, or someone buying you a coffee, or the barista that smiles at you, and all these sort of things. So that sort of hardwires yourself to look for compassion and kindness and gratitude. And that's what we're talking about, the RAS. So the RAS is the reticular activating system. It's a series of networks and neurons in the brain that it helps us to look for familiarity. So we look for things that are familiar to us. And probably the best way to describe the RAS is, let's say you bought yourself a brand new car, and you bought yourself a little red mini car because they're really cool and not many people have them. And you've got a little red mini convertible, and you start driving around the streets in your little red mini, and then you start, oh, look, there's another one. Oh, there's another little red mini. And then within like 2 months, you're driving your little red mini car everywhere. Oh my God, they're just everywhere. There's little red minis everywhere, because now your RAS, your reticular activating system, is hardwired to recognize that. So if you start hardwiring your RAS to look for negativity and stress and all these things, guess what? You notice more of that. So if we start looking around for compassion, and, like I said, the barista that smiles at you in the morning, or someone that comes in and, gives you a nice comment or gives you a little gift, we start hardwiring ourselves to look for more of that. And when we look for more of that, we start noticing more of that, we become more aware of it, and we start releasing, good chemicals through the body. Oxytocin, that's that dose. So the dose is the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, and the endorphins. So these happy, feel-good chemicals through the body, and a lot of them are released through, gratitude practices. The oxytocin definitely through that feeling and sharing compassion with other people. Giving somebody a hug will release oxytocin.
Yeah.
Even patting your pet will release oxytocin. Giving somebody a compliment or receiving a compliment will release oxytocin. That's a great one there. The endorphins, obviously, they're good with movement. So getting that dose of movement every day, getting up in the morning, exercise. Runners know very well. It's called the runner's high. If you're doing vigorous activity, you get that endorphin rush there. Sharing laughter and happiness with people. The other one is serotonin. So one of the reasons I get up early in the morning and get outside, get fresh sunlight in the morning and go for a walk, is to get that serotonin production into me. So that first sort of rays of the sun, which will set up my circadian rhythm, so I'll sleep better that night, but also just that sort of nice mood stabilizer. And by the way, those 90-second breath breaks we did before, also a great way to get that serotonin mood stabilizer to stabilize your mood there. So we can release all these feel-good chemicals in the day. Dopamine, obviously, by completing your task, by feeling fulfilled, by your self-care activities, by doing all of these things, release dopamine. So ask yourself, how I said before, what have I done for me today? That question. If we expanded that, what have I done to give me my daily dose of chemicals? We can start doing these activities to actually make us have feel-good chemicals going through the body instead of the cortisol and adrenaline going through our body.
That's a really great framework, Melo. Thank you. Right. So we fixed up the mic here, and the last chapter, I also personally took a lot out of this, Melo, on balance. It really reminded me of what I know I need to keep doing, and how much I actually really value balance myself. excuse me, the life lesson that was in that chapter that I'd love to just quickly read for folks is this, that you wrote: we can find balance if we give ourselves permission. Everybody, I want you to just underline that word permission. We can find balance if we give ourselves permission to slow down after periods of stress or busyness, find rest, and create spaces to renew your energy. I often find that it's difficult for a lot of people just to give ourselves permission to do something for ourselves and to actually let go of the guilt surrounding the
Mm.
notion of actually slowing down and finding balance. Have you found the same, Mello? And one of the things I'll just say really quickly is sometimes I have, and it's just life, right? You've got a really busy schedule. I've got some things coming up. I've got to do some traveling, a lot of workshops in a short period of time, traveling overseas. But I actually think I'm actually looking forward to that. And I also know what I've programmed is some time where I'm not going to be traveling afterwards,
Mm.
or I'm going to go away for a weekend with my family and give myself little rewards for those busy periods. And
Mm.
it just invigorates me because you've got something to look forward to. If you're just constantly on the grind, yes, that's going to wear you down.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Probably one of the most difficult things. I do coach a lot of high achievers, high performers, like I said before, from CEOs of companies to athletes to entrepreneurs. And a lot of them, that's the hardest thing to actually get them to stop.
Mm,
They think that busyness is productive, and being busy on this fast treadmill, and that's the best way to work. Just full throttle, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And there's a cost to that, and that cost is burnout. So the first thing I need to do is ask them to give themselves permission to stop. And I try to get across to them that if they actually stop for 90 seconds or 2 minutes or
yeah,
5 minutes or 10 minutes, then their next 2 hours will be more productive.
so true. It's
Yeah.
true.
Sometimes the very thing that we need to be more productive is a pause, is a
Right.
stop. And you can stop for a couple of minutes and you reset your mind. The amygdala deactivates and refire up. The prefrontal cortex is the place that we want to be operating out of. So the
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex is that area of executive function.
Yeah.
Emotional regulation happens there. Decision making, planning, logical analytical thinking, all of these things are happening from the front part of the brain, but it's not designed to be switched on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, the research says that we can only operate in peak performance for 90-minute to 2 hour windows. And then we need a break. And then we need to change gears there. So that's that first thing, to give that self permission to stop. And I call it punctuate your day. Punctuate your day with short little rests. And sometimes we can't afford to even have a rest. But I coach a lot of surgeons also, and I say, even if you can get 90 seconds while you're washing your hands between surgery,
Mm,
and follow your breath for 90 seconds, that's better than nothing. Or
yeah.
if you can even go outside and walk around the block for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So punctuating your day with these sort of periods, because it's all about balance. It's all about balancing that sympathetic activity, the fight and flight response, that on sort of place, with that parasympathetic, and sort of keep that in balance. So exactly what you said there. And I share this in the book also. If you've had a busy day, you've had a full on day at work, and you've been teaching all day or working all day or whatever it is that you're doing, give yourself permission to have a night off. Don't check your emails. Don't, stay on your, phone and start thumbing around with fodder. Give your brain a bit of a break. If you've had a busy week, let's say, give yourself a little reward, like you were saying before. Have a weekend away with the family, or just, have a doing some hobbies and interests that you like to do. If you've had a busy term, at school, or if you've had a busy period, or a busy project, give yourself a little retreat, a little break, whatever it is that makes you feel good, that recharges that. So if
Yes.
we're doing these constantly throughout the days, weeks, and months, then we won't be wiped out and burnt out at the end of the week or the end of the day. We're renewing our energy on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. Athletes know it very well. I coach a few athletes, including an Olympic athlete. They are fantastic at actually
Yeah.
taking renewal breaks. So
Yeah.
they know, to be the best at their
Mm,
craft or their sports, they can't run a marathon nonstop. They do their training, and then they have a break. They eat well, they sleep well, they renew their energy, then they do more training. and they have renewal breaks. So they know the idea of that very well.
We can take a lot from them because they know the power of recovery. They're not going to be able to
Yes.
perform without recovery. And I just loved it, Melo, because we can start from a 90-second breath break, right, whilst you're washing your hands, to other things like, you talked about punctuate. I talk about changing channels,
Yeah.
go for a walk around the block. And I always find that when the fogginess begins,
Yes.
it'd actually be better if you can pick it up before that. But sometimes, hey, it's just, there's the fogginess. I'm not concentrating. I'm getting easily distracted, right? Your energy's waning, right? Your focus isn't what it was or what it needs to be. Change channels, right, is the way I think about it.
Yeah.
Get some sun, take a 90-second breath break, whatever it is. But then as you're doing it, throughout, where you might sort of build it up from a weekend away to doing connecting with a friend or some interests and hobbies, then one of the biggest things I took from Melo's work, everybody, is this. Can you recover from burnout? Sure, but it's really, really hard, and it can take months or years. Much, much easier to prevent it. And that's one of the key things I took from your book.
If we catch it in the earlier stages, and again, what you're talking about is that awareness piece. Having the awareness. What do I need to do right now to renew my energy? Do I need to walk around the block? Do I need to make a cup of tea? Do I need to go chat with somebody and change the channel? I like the way you put that. And what can I do to change that? I have a rule every time I get up from my computer. Every time I've been working away for a few hours, I have to close off at least 5 tabs.
I need to do that because my tabs are terrible.
Yeah. Exactly. And just reset your focus again. I have another rule when I come back from lunch. So after I've been working a whole sort of morning and into the lunch mode, when I come back from lunch, I ask myself the question, what's the one thing I need to do this afternoon to make my day successful? Not the 700 things, but what's the one thing I need to do? So you're resetting your intentions constantly throughout the day, blocking out your time with periods of work, 2-hour windows of hard cognitive work, punctuating that with some breaks and little rest breaks, and then more hard work, and just keep working in that flow. You won't be wiped out at the end of the day.
Melo, I just want to thank you again for the time. We've actually covered as much as we could. Well, actually, we've covered every chapter in the book, but very briefly. And I thought we said, look, let's just keep going, and we'll either publish it in full or maybe break it up. We don't know, but at least we've got you and we've got your wisdom and all of the chapters. I actually forgot to show everybody, because if you're watching this, everybody, I'll show you where you can actually get Melo's book. I was going to show you that at the beginning, but I'll put it here now, and we might edit it and put it in the beginning of the video. So if you're watching this via video, I'll show you where you can get Melo's book, but you can also get it. We'll put the show notes wherever you're accessing this, whether it's via podcast or on our website or on YouTube or wherever it is. We'll put the text, and I want to see if I can just pull this up here. And you're seeing this, Melo, on your screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, so here it is, everybody. This is where there's a QR code where you can get Melo's book, and you can actually download a free chapter by going to Melo's website there. And I just cannot recommend it enough. It is truly transformational, everybody. And as I said, we'll be putting all of these details in text in the show notes wherever you're accessing this interview with Melo. And thanks again, Melo. I really appreciate you taking the time. I've loved this book. I truly have. As I said, I would go and say to my wife, look, let me read this to you. Let me read this to you. I think it's just a really nice affirmation too, because the more you do this, the more you actually see, your cancer client, the clients you with, your own life, the people, my own life, the people that I've worked with. And it's like, well, wait a minute. These things seem to be helping everybody across every area of life. So really powerful. And
my goal with the book was basically to capture my 3 decades of work that I have done, and simplify the complex, and just make it super easy to learn and to implement in your life, because that's where the change happens. And by the way, we didn't mention actually that it's also released as an audio book. So
I
Yeah, so I was recently, which was kind of nice to reread the book after, because I wrote the book around about a year ago now, and I had to reread the book. And a word of advice for anybody that has to read an audio book is do not use the word similarly. Similarly, because I got stuck on that for about 20 minutes. Similarly, similarly, similarly. But it is released also on Amazon. You can find it, and Audible, and all those places that you find audiobooks if you prefer just to listen to it. And
oh,
it is my voice. So I'm the one that I did speak it all the way through, of course.
well, I'll have to get the audio version also, Mello, because I do prefer listening actually. Uh,
Yes.
yeah, but thank you again, and thank you everybody for being here and accessing this. You can find Mello either through me. I can pass on his information, or you've gotten that information, and we'll put that in the show notes also.
Thanks, Rocky. That was awesome to go through chapter by chapter. I really enjoyed a little reminder on the purpose of the book.
Great. Thanks again, Mello.
Thanks, mate.